Okay, so Professor Carlsen, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
You've been here for 2 days and the weather has been nice for you.
Well, it was raining yesterday, but it's sunny this morning, so this is just a changing environment for our meeting.
Well, actually, I thought it would be rainy the whole week, but luckily it stopped raining yesterday. It's easier to do recording. So Professor Carlsen, in accordance with the project toward an ASEAN lifelong learning agenda, I would like to ask you a few questions regarding this issue. Number one, why do you think this project is crucial to ASEAN countries?
I think that with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is a universal and global agenda for development at the global level over the next 15 years from today until 2030, all sub-regions and regions and also nations in the world are trying to adjust to the changed context, both at the global, regional, and also at the national level. So the world will now look much more into what is quality education. It is clear from the evaluation of the work being done in the last 15 years on education for all that access to education is not enough. We also need to have high quality of the education that takes place once you have accessed it. But the new thing is that now we also look into lifelong learning opportunities for all. So in fact, the title of the Sustainable Development Goal 4 is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. So the new thing is to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And I think this is the time today is a really good moment for the ASEAN countries to come together and try to see what they can do at the national level in relation to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, but also what can they do together in the ASEAN sub-region in Asia and the Pacific. There's a lot of cooperation also with countries outside of the ASEAN region, so also trying to see what can be done and learn from good practice from other countries outside of the ASEAN is right now a golden opportunity. ASEAN also has the ASEM cooperation, the ASEAN-Europe meeting with summits for heads of states, but also meetings for ministers of education. So I think the ASEAN countries right now can formulate a common agenda for lifelong learning that can be helpful for each of the countries at the national level, and they can do this also in cooperation with partners, of course, within the region, but also outside of the region.
Thank you. Then I understand from your remarks also this morning that it's necessary to develop lifelong learning, which may include non-formal and informal education as well?
Lifelong learning without non-formal and informal learning is not possible, because a lot of the learning provision that is offered after formal schooling takes place in the form of learning in civil society organizations or in workplaces in the form of work-based learning. And a lot of the learning that takes place in museums and in libraries is equally important. So lifelong learning today is simply a holistic, comprehensive system or framework or policy that includes both the formal education system but also the non-formal and the informal sectors. The new thing is, in fact, with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the intersectoral approach. Learning not only takes place within the education sector, but it also takes place in other sectors like health, or like the labor market sector, or in agriculture, and so on. So the new dimension to lifelong learning with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, that is to approach lifelong learning opportunities for all in relation to other sectors. That is the intersectoral approach. So in fact, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development links education to sustainable development and links education to all the other 16 Sustainable Development Goals.
However, some countries still do not have an established policy for lifelong learning yet, like Cambodia, and the GBM from Cambodia also noticed this yesterday. What do you think can be the necessary steps for a policy for lifelong learning to be fully developed?
Even if some countries do not have a legal framework or law or legislation for lifelong learning, I think all of them have institutions and settings for lifelong learning, like community learning centers, the CLCs, that offer non-formal learning provision. So it's not necessary to have a formal policy or legislative framework in order to have lifelong learning opportunities for all. It's an advantage. It can further promote lifelong learning if countries build a national policy for lifelong learning, but it's not a necessary precondition. I think all countries, all senior countries, they already have lifelong learning provision for young people, for adults, for school dropouts, or for out-of-school children. And they also try to develop a holistic approach where you look at the role of different subsectors in education and learning provision from preschool to post-retirement age in a holistic approach, and then focus on developing opportunities for everybody who have left the formal school system or who in fact never had the best chances of accessing it. So I think, or I know all countries, all similar countries, they already have some institutionalized offers for lifelong learning, civil society organizations, NGOs offering learning opportunities. But I think it could improve the outreach of these and the quality of this provision if it is more systematized in a system or in a policy or in a framework. So my advice, if you ask for my advice or my message, could be to try to strengthen the role of community learning centers at the local level in rural areas, and also to build up learning cities as pillars of building the learning society. The learning society is a society where citizens, they have the best possibilities to continue to learn. And to continue to learn happens in different contexts. One context is the rural areas, and another context is the city. More than half of the world's population today lives in cities, and more people move from rural areas in the coming years to cities. So I think one of the main pillars for lifelong learning policy, that is to have mayors, governors, city councils develop a lifelong learning strategy for inclusive, sustainable urban development in their cities and take responsibility for moving forward many of the agendas of lifelong learning, like literacy, like the combat against climate change, like the combat against youth unemployment, etc. Another pillar I would say that is important, that is recognition of prior learning, or as we call it in UNESCO, the recognition, validation and accreditation of the outcomes of non-formal and informal learning. If countries have a national system for recognizing non-formal and informal learning at the same level as formal learning, this could also improve the conditions for people to come back to education system, because what they already have learned is recognized as part of the entrance conditions to new education, or to enter into new jobs and have a new chance at the labor market. So RPL, as I see it, is a very important tool of lifelong learning to re-enter education or to have better access to the labor market to get jobs.
Thank you. That's a very informative message for educational sectors in ASEAN countries. And thank you very much for joining me with this interview. I really appreciate the time you spent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Good.
It was very nice talking.